54 negotiating days until the summit. A satellite launched from a plane, and the District of Columbia loses its showcase drug war. This is the CBS Evening News. Dan Rather reporting. Good evening. George Bush and Mikhail Gorbachev will hold a summit in the United States between May 30th and June 3rd. President Bush confirmed this today. Mr. Bush did so amid increasing criticism that he is not being nearly firm enough with Gorbachev about the use of force against freedom and independence movements in Lithuania and elsewhere. Our coverage begins with Leslie Stahl at the White House. Leslie?
Dan, at the White House, they're calling it the Tough Love Summit, meaning that the two leaders will discuss both the issues where they disagree, like Lithuania, and the ones where they share the same goals, like arms control. The second Bush-Gorbachev summit will be held here in Washington, with side trips, possibly one to Kennebunkport, Maine. Mr. Bush chose to discuss the summit in a rather odd setting, a photo session with rock star Michael Jackson.
I'm very pleased the dates have been set, and it is very important that we have these conversations. Dialogue is important, and I'm looking forward to seeing Mr. Gorbachev here.
Though the summit is less than 2 months away, the White House still hopes the two leaders will sign or at least initial several arms control treaties, including agreements on chemical weapons, conventional forces in Europe, and START, which would limit long-range nuclear missiles. Secretary of State Baker and Soviet Foreign Minister Shevardnadze spent most of their day in meetings trying to make progress toward those deals.
I believe that the discussion was very constructive and substantive.
С участием всех членов рабочих групп, всех экспертов, крупных наших специалистов.
Our discussion was attended by our major experts on arms control.
The crisis in Lithuania will also be a summit focus, though Mr. Bush clearly places the overall relationship with the Soviets first. And a new CBS News New York Times poll seems to show that Americans agree with him. When asked what was more important, 41% said maintaining good relations with Gorbachev. Just 31% thought support for Lithuanian independence was more important. But Lithuania is clearly vital to Moscow. Shevardnadze told Senate leaders last night that if Gorbachev can't solve that crisis peacefully, he might not survive.
By inference, he indicated that, if these things aren't meant to work themselves out through dialogue, that, Gorbachev could be gone.
Officials here think that the announcement of the summit itself may act as a force for moderation over Lithuania. After all, the last thing Gorbachev wants now is for George Bush to cancel the meeting. The president would be under great pressure to do just that if the Soviet leader ordered a crackdown. Dan?
Thank you, Leslie. While some White House officials are raising arms control expectations for this summit, our State Department correspondent Bill Platt reports now that U.S. and Soviet arms negotiators aren't so sure. Bill?
Well, Dan, the timing of the summit, barely 8 weeks away, has thrown plans for arms control agreements into some confusion. Though the White House still says that it wants to sign a strategic arms agreement, or would like to, at the summit, negotiators now say that that may prove impractical. The outstanding issues are just too tough. The Soviets go even further. They say it's impractical and not very likely to expect a treaty by the time of the summit. Now, ditto, an understanding on reducing conventional forces in Europe, something that both sides had hoped to do. And on top of all that, both the U.S. and the Soviets have thrown in some new wrinkles, new variations on their existing arms control proposals, all of which makes it very unlikely that they'll be able to sort all of this out by the end of May. Dan?
Well, Bill, if the summit date is fixed as it now is, how do Mr. Bush and Gorbachev finesse the arms control issues?
Well, Dan, they'll probably just declare victory and move on, leaving their staffs under pressure to deliver and work things out satisfactorily. And, on the really knotty issues, like multiple warhead missiles, for example, will be left for a second arms control treaty.
Bill Plant at the State Department, thanks. A new U.S. entry today in the growing competition to put payloads in space at less than sky-high prices. It's a rocket called Pegasus. Jerry Bowen reports on today's launch, on the fly and on the cheap.
Following a one-day weather delay, a NASA B-52 rumbled off the main runway at California's Edwards Air Force Base today, with private industry's latest entry into the space race tucked beneath its right wing, the three-stage Pegasus rocket, touted as the economical air launch alternative to the more expensive and large land-based rockets. Borrowing from the past, the high-altitude launches of the old X-15 rocket plane, the 50-foot Pegasus is designed to launch above 40,000 feet, soar into space on its novel delta wing, and more than a few prayers.
NASA 1 is go for launch. NASA 1 is go.
Aside from the space shuttle, no other winged vehicle has successfully flown at 8 times the speed of sound. 60 miles off the California coast today, above the clouds at 43,000 feet, Pegasus got its test.
Ignition.
As planned, only seconds after dropping from the B-52, Pegasus roared off with its payload, a Navy communications satellite and a NASA experiment, to a low Earth orbit, 320 nautical miles.
This is NASA 1. Pegasus is in orbit.
A moment that brought handshakes and hugs in mission control. Orbital Sciences and Hercules, the builders of the rocket, claim it can carry a 900-pound payload at a flight cost of just $8 million. That's twice the payload at half the price of similar-sized land-launched rockets. Promoters say the age of microspace has arrived.
A little over 2 years ago, Pegasus was a bold new idea on OSC's drawing boards and in the minds and hearts of our people. Today, we've turned that vision into reality.
Pegasus becomes the first privately developed rocket to carry a satellite into space, but with an assist from Uncle Sam. The government paid for the space freight on this first mission. The Defense Department has contracts for the next 3. Jerry Bowen, CBS News, Edwards Air Force Base, California.
And still to come on the CBS Evening News, Harold Dow on crack-damaged children. Too much for teachers. And Ron Allen on old folks. How much is enough to see a movie? President Bush and his drug policy coordinator, William Bennett, have been forced to admit their high-publicity crackdown on drug crime in the nation's capital is a failure. The official report from Bennett isn't out yet, but already no one wants to be held accountable. Eric Ingberg has our report.
It was almost a year ago the new federal drug czar William Bennett got headlines by naming Washington, D.C. as his #1 target for cleanup in the federal drug war. A year later, and the report cards on the federal effort are coming in. 454 murders, 60% of them drug-related, maintains the city's unwanted status as national murder capital. And the mayor of Washington stands accused of using cocaine. Officials in the drug czar's office concede the cleanup in their own backyard has been largely a failure up to now. They blame the mayor and the city government, but others blame Bennett.
Declare war against drugs nationally, to give up on that and concentrate on one little district, and then to walk away from that district, wouldn't you agree it's time to look for someone else?
Calls from addicts for treatment have doubled in the city, but experts say there's still no place to put them.
I think we're having tremendous success in the most critical area, that is getting people to want to get off of drugs. The problem is we have a mismatch between the demand for treatment, in part generated by the war on drugs, and the supply of treatment.
And outside analysts say that 1 year is too short a time to evaluate a drug program which is just starting out.
We are not losing this war. There are some bright spots, and we need to focus on that with a sense of hope and a sense of knowledge that if we continue, we're going to win this one.
Aware that a largely negative report on the D.C. drug war is coming out soon, city and federal officials are reacting in a way typical for Washington. Not concern over what went wrong, but finger-pointing over who gets the blame. Eric Engberg, CBS News, Washington.
A frightening new dimension to the crack cocaine plague. A federal report estimates 100,000 crack babies are being born each year in this country. Their mothers used crack during pregnancy. The babies were born damaged. And now it appears they may be damaged for life. The government says caring for them could eventually cost $20 billion a year. Harold Dow reports on the human cost of the children of crack.
He has a problem socializing with other kids.
The experts warned that children like Ed would be coming.
He don't know how to interact with his classmates.
They told the schools to prepare for the worst.
There have been incidents where he has actually hit people, blood splattering all over the place.
Ed is only 7 years old. He was born a crack baby.
Ed's mother is crack addicted. And at the time she was carrying him, she used drugs. And it had a big effect on Ed.
How are we counting?
Today, there are thousands of school-aged children just like Ed, taking their seats in classrooms across America.
I think it's going to be a terrific crisis because of the sheer numbers.
Dr. Avery has examined hundreds of infants who were exposed to drugs before birth. Many are born premature, underweight, with serious physical problems, and some are brain damaged.
This dark area is actually a hole in the brain. There's actually an area of brain tissue which has died and left that dark shadow, and that part of the brain will never be normal.
I see the situation getting even worse day by day.
Pat Thomas is the foster mother of 7 children. All were exposed to crack before they were born.
Anne is a little delayed. She came from a crack-addicted mother, and she had problem with her speech. Lori is 6, and Lori often talks about mom using drugs.
Tina is a mother of 4 children, all crack babies.
Did the thought cross your mind that you could be hurting the child?
Of course
Hurting
it
your
did.
children?
And every time that thought crossed my mind, I would get high, so I didn't have to think about that anymore, so I didn't have to face that.
Now teachers and foster parents are thinking about it.
Ed made some little girl bust her knee open, and he destroyed one little boy's lunchbox.
Well, what did he do last week?
Last week, Ed punched the teacher below the eye and was suspended for 1 day.
Ed, did you hit the teacher? Why'd you do that?
Ed has wide mood swings, his teacher says. He fidgets, has a lack of concentration, and his behavior is unpredictable.
What did that tell you when he struck back at you?
It told me that his violence was escalating.
Here in Los Angeles, the school district has a special program to deal with children who suffer side effects caused by prenatal drug use. It's an effort to help them, and it's also an effort to try to understand this terrible legacy.
Where does this one go?
The children are divided into small groups. If a child doesn't understand a lesson plan, the teacher will repeat it until it is understood. But the thing that makes this program unique is when the final bell rings, the school day does not end for the teachers. They meet with a psychologist, an MD, and a social worker and analyze what took place in the classroom that day. A child's home life is closely monitored.
This is the challenge that education services are going to have to look at and deal with.
But most school systems are not dealing with that challenge, and most teachers cannot deal with children like Ed.
He's very angry. There is not a child he has not attacked. He has not drawn blood. The eye, the face, everybody has come with just bloody. I am not prepared to deal with a child who is so violent that I can't turn my back.
It's a problem that is growing. It's estimated that more than 1,000 drug-damaged children are born every day. Harold Dow, CBS News, New York.
Today was the traditional Chinese Day of Mourning for the Dead. For millions, a day to remember those murdered in the military crackdown on last year's movement for democracy. But in Beijing today, the government declared and enforced a ban on remembering. John Sheehan reports.
Tiananmen Square was closed to the public today for fear that there might be some demonstration of grief for the victims of last June's massacre of pro-democracy protesters. Today is China's Memorial Day, the festival of Qingming Festival, a day to honor the dead. Ordinarily, this cemetery would be crowded with people tending their family graves. But this year, even that innocent activity is banned. Before the Festival of Mourning, Beijing's hardline mayor Chen Shitung held a secret meeting with city-level Communist Party officials. A transcript of that meeting, obtained by CBS News, reveals that Chen ordered the arrest of anyone who appeared to be a dissident. No need to ask about procedure or legal process, said the mayor. He instructed the officials to prevent traditional remembrances such as the laying of wreaths.
The government is so isolated and so fearful of its own people that it's reacting in a way that only exacerbates the situation. It makes everything worse.
Once again, thousands of troops control the center of the capital, billeted in public buildings near the square. Communist authorities have created an atmosphere of intimidation. Uniformed and plainclothes police try to listen to every conversation, photograph anyone who lingers. But the massive military response to rumors of possible protest suggests that having killed to preserve the dictatorship, China's leaders now live in constant fear of their own people. John Sheehan, CBS News, Beijing.
Nelson Mandela met with South African President F.W. de Klerk for 3 hours today, and de Klerk said they set a new date for the start of negotiations on a new constitution. The date was not announced. Last month, Mandela called off the negotiations to protest the shooting of black demonstrators by white police. For the first time in 40 years, a democratically elected parliament met today in Eastern Europe. The East German legislature chose a woman president, Sabine Bergmann-Poh, who told members that their main task is to prepare the way for a united Germany. East and West Germans are already debating what for them is the toughest issue of unification, the money issue. Ray Brady has that story.
5 months ago, these people poured through the Berlin Wall to West Berlin. But today, across the country, hundreds of thousands of East Germans like these demonstrated against West Berlin over money. This woman says, I'll have to buy a coffin because I'll starve to death. You can hear the Berlin Wall coming down, but before Germany can unify, the two countries must first merge the separate currencies they now have. But West Germany, in one proposal, is saying to the East, our powerful Deutschmark will stay the same, but any money used on the other side of this wall will be worth half of what it is now. In other words, they'll get one West German mark for every 2 East German marks they now have, a formula that will cut much of the East Germans' savings as well as their pay.
The result could be very tough. And we may see even violence in the streets in East Germany.
In this campaign speech, West Germany's Chancellor, Helmut Kohl, seemed to suggest the two currencies would be exchanged even up, 1 for 1, a statement Kohl denies he made. Talk to Dieter Wiese in this East German factory. What the West really wants, he says, is a pool of cheap labor. Combined with West German know-how, that would make them even richer. As East and West Germany move toward unity, for the East Germans, the big celebration of the Berlin Wall coming down has turned into the disillusionment of the morning after, a time when the protest from East Germany is not for freedom, but for money. Ray Brady, CBS News, East Berlin.
The U.S. Environmental Protection Agency today talked up improvements in the nation's air quality, but the EPA's annual survey out today showed 121 million Americans are subjected to polluted air that fails to meet federal health standards. A jury in Bridgeport, Connecticut today rejected a delicatessen owner's claim that he was promised an 8% share in actor Paul Newman's food companies. The jury deliberated just 5 hours over Julius Gold's assertion that he was owed stock for help he said he provided in getting the companies launched. Profits from Newman's food companies, $28 million so far, go to charity. '89 was a blockbuster year for Hollywood. North America's movie theaters last year took in a record $5 billion plus at the box office. Then why is the movie industry being so tough on the old folks in nursing homes? Ron Allen investigated.
Attention all the residents, there will be a movie showing...
It's an unlikely setting for a crime. Nursing home residents just watching a rental movie.
it takes their minds off of themselves because they have something else to think about instead of their ailments.
Renting movies for nursing home patients is so common that even Hollywood has made movies about it.
We're going to watch this movie Cocoon.
But the movie industry, which now makes more money from video cassettes than ticket sales, charges nursing homes are breaking the law by showing rental video movies to groups of people without a license. Hollywood wants the nursing homes to pay a license fee, just like small theaters.
It is a dollars and cents issue of the nursing home operators attempting to obtain a commodity for free.
Why is a nursing home not a home?
The issue came before a congressional committee when elderly patients like Natalie Runkle began writing letters to the movie industry from her nursing home in Seattle.
Having them pick on people in nursing homes and retirement homes, I think is very poor judgment on their part.
Agent Irving Swifty Lazar, the so-called king of the fast deal, agrees.
It seems to me unfair, a little too harsh, not to oblige the people in nursing homes to see film.
One nursing home chain owner received a license bill for $16,000. Individual facilities would have to pay much less. But even the movie industry admits a minimal amount of money is at stake given their billion-dollar budgets. Faced with legislation that might weaken copyright laws, movie producers are trying to come up with a proposal that would exempt nursing homes from license fees.
No nursing home is being threatened with legal action. This being the case, we hope you will agree that there is no need for congressional action.
In the grand tradition of Hollywood, the movie industry and the nursing homes are anxious to negotiate a happy ending. Ron Allen, CBS News, Hollywood.
And that's part of our world tonight. Stay tuned now for 48 Hours. Tonight, 48 Hours is on mental health problems among teenagers. That's 48 Hours at 8/7 Central Time. Dan Rather for the CBS Evening News. See you again soon on 48 Hours.
Trouble and parents desperate for answers.
Well, I'm scared. That's it. I'm calling the police.
What will the next 48 hours be like tonight?